Hey guys, since this wonderful little decade, the years between 2010 and 2019 is now over and done with, I decided to do a list of my favorite horror films that came out this decade, but I decided to do it with some people. I'm joined by Bill Burns.
Hello.
And John.
Hey everybody.
And what we're going to do is we're going to go year by year, so I'm going to do my list from 2010, then we're going to go to Bill's list, then John's list, and then when we go to 2011, it will be the same routine, all the way until 2019. Now, when I first started making this list, I had a few movies I considered putting on the list that I decided not to, because I wasn't sure if they would really qualify as horror, like... For, I think it was 2011, I put the J.J. Abrams film Super 8 on that list, but then I thought about it more, and I was like, I'm not really sure if I would count that as horror. I even put the William Friedkin film Killer Joe on the list, but then I thought about it more, and I was like, I'm not sure. That's borderline, but I'm not sure if you would really qualify Killer Joe as a horror movie. Yeah, without further ado, let's get to my 2010 list. So, we'll start with my list of my favorite horror films from the year 2010, and these are going to be in no particular order, but the first horror film I want to talk about, I do think is the best horror film from 2010, and that is a South Korean film called I Saw the Devil. Now, this is a movie that I heard about back when it first came out, but I didn't actually see the movie until a few weeks ago, and when I was watching it, I was like, how did it take me 10 years to finally see this movie? This is a movie that, honestly, I think deserves the same following that Oldboy has. I think it is an amazing revenge thriller. The film's about an agent whose wife is brutally killed by a serial killer, and he tracks this serial killer down, but instead of arresting this guy, and instead of even killing him, he basically makes this serial killer's life a living hell, and it gets to a point where you almost feel sorry for the serial killer. You don't, but you almost do. It's a revenge film almost like Irreversible, where it kind of shows you that there are consequences for revenge, and the movie even ends where the hero breaks down crying, even though he does technically get his revenge in the movie. What do you guys think of I Saw the Devil?
Well, actually, it's my second favorite horror film of 2010. I agree with you. I think it's a brilliant film. It very much reminded me of Friedrich Nietzsche, right? The German philosopher who said, those who fight monsters, beware that they don't become monsters themselves. And I think that's exactly what happens to the Secret Service agent in this film, that he becomes sometimes even a greater monster than the serial killer was. But yes, I think Kim Ji-woon's direction in the film it's almost like documentary, but it's very powerful. It's an amazing film.
And John, did you see I Saw the Devil?
No, I haven't seen it, sorry.
The next movie on my list is Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan, which is a brilliant movie. It's kind of a sister piece to The Wrestler, which wasn't a horror film, but you could definitely see the parallels between the two movies, whereas The Wrestler was about wrestling, which is a very masculine industry. This is more about ballet, but it shows you how ballerinas really do have to push their bodies to the limits, and you see the psychological toll it takes on Natalie Portman's character, and it's a very psychological film. What do you guys think of Black Swan?
Well, it's my third favorite horror film of 2010. I love Darren Aronofsky's films. Again, another brilliant film. I agree with you. I think this film very much is about the physical and psychological demands of art. How performers need validation, and they'll go to any lengths to get that validation. I also agree with you about Natalie Portman's performance in the film is brilliant, but I also think Barbara Hershey's performance in the film. I think Barbara Hershey is one of the most underrated actresses of like the last 40 years, and she's an amazing actress and gives another spectacular performance. I also think that Black Swan is interesting because it introduces two themes that I saw looking over the decade that I saw really sort of resonate. One is this idea about art, about what art does or what art is, and how it not only has sort of positive consequences, but it could have negative consequences. And looking over the movies that I thought were interesting in the last decade, I saw the theme of art coming up. The other thing, of course, is women, right? Women have become more and more the focus of a critique within horror about sort of femininity, the gender constructs within our society. So I thought this was an interesting movie that it sort of really sort of brought those to the fore, and then more and more artists within the decade really ran with those themes.
John, what do you think of Black Swan?
Loved it. Natalie Portman, this was like probably one of her best films I've seen, even though despite I've seen her in a lot of other things. Yeah, I agree, Bill. That definitely kind of the film, like, you know, shows like how like people like push themselves like to the limit, like when they go like too far, when they're trying to be like perfectionist or performing at the art, especially like how like when we see how like she's like going crazy because she's scared and worried, like what if I don't give like, you know, the best performance, what if people will hate me or not love me and stuff like that. And it's been a long time since I've seen the movie, but yeah, it was a great film.
And I also think that later on in the decade when he made Mother, that it's an extension of some of the themes that we saw in Black Swan.
The next movie on my list is Predators, the third film in the Predator franchise, or fifth if you count the two Alien vs. Predator movies. This is a movie that a lot of people are kind of split on. There are some people who love it, and then there are people who absolutely hate it. I happen to really love this one. I think it's probably just as good as the first two Predator movies, and I am a pretty big fan of the Predator franchise. What do either of you think of this one?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I can't say that I'm like a huge fan of it, but I did enjoy it. I was kind of perplexed by Lawrence Fishburne's performance in the film, but no, I enjoyed it. I thought it was it's certainly not one of my favorite films of the decade, but it was very enjoyable. It was very entertaining.
All right, John, what do you think of Predators?
I actually still have not seen it.
The next movie on my list is Gareth Edwards' film Monsters. This is a film that I first saw it before Gareth Edwards' reboot of Godzilla came out, and when I saw this movie, I was like, wow, Godzilla's in the right hands. Then I saw Gareth Edwards' Godzilla, and while I do like that movie, it was not as good as this movie. And I actually think this is a better tribute to the original Godzilla than his actual Godzilla movie is, because people forget that the original Godzilla is not so much about the monster, it's more so about the subtext of why the monster exists, and it's really about the people. It's about how these human characters are reacting to the monster, and that it's kind of the same deal with Monsters. This is a monster movie, but it's more of a drama about these people just trying to survive with the backdrop of this like alien invasion giant monster movie. What do you think of Monsters?
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much. I agree. I think it's a really interesting take on the whole giant monster genre. What I really liked about it was that it also showed you the changes that society had to go through to accommodate and to deal with this invasion of the giant monsters. That to me is very fascinating. Like, how does a society, how does a community actually have to change? How does it adapt to this, insane sort of, on a global scale, this major revision of what we believe to be reality or what we believe to be sort of nature, and how they deal with it.
John, did you see Monsters?
No.
All right.
Okay, so what I did with mine was I was a little bit more. I know Christian said he didn't really have an order. I'm very Aristotelian, so I had to do an order. So I'll start with my fifth favorite film of 2010, which is The Last Exorcism, directed by Daniel Stem. Again, obviously, this was another decade dominated a lot by found footage films, pseudo-documentary films, and a lot of those films obviously are very problematic. But I thought this film was actually really well done, and the reason why I really liked it was because of the acting. Sometimes I think in found footage films, the acting isn't really up to snuff. I don't know if it's a reflection of, it makes it seem like it's more real, that there's like amateur acting, or that the characters are really not really nice people, or they're not really sort of. But this film, I think, I really cared about the characters. Patrick Fabian, who plays the person who debunks exorcisms, and Ashley Bell, who is the unfortunate girl who is the who feels the effects of The Last Exorcism. So again, it was a film that I really enjoyed, and I think did a lot of interesting things with the found footage genre.
And I didn't see this movie, so I really have no comment. John, did you see this?
No, I didn't see the movie either.
All right, so my fourth favorite film was a Serbian film by Serdan Spasojevic. Obviously, this film was hugely controversial. Really, it seemed to embody what people sort of imagine torture porn to be. And again, it is a really brutal, transgressive, kind of, graphic film. But again, you have to remember, right, especially the fact the name of the film is a Serbian film. What happened in Serbia over the last 10 plus years, right, in Croatia and Bosnia and Kosovo, the ethnic cleansing, the genocide, the torture, murder, and rape of people, I think this film is a metaphor for what has really happened. This is fake, right? It's not real. This is a fake film. Yet what really happened to Serbians, what really happened to Bosnians, Croatians, these things really happened to these people. So to sort of make this huge uproar about a film that is fake, why weren't these people the same people who are making a big uproar about this film with all these fake atrocities, why weren't they making a big deal about the real atrocities that were happening to Serbians between 1991 and the early 2000s? So I found the movie really fascinating. Yes, there are some scenes that are really hard to take, but again, it's one of those films that I think is important because for the metaphoric rather than the literal events of the film.
Yeah, this is a movie I've heard a lot about, and people are very split on this movie. There are people like you who love it, and then there are people who really swear against this movie. There's some people who even say, if you defend this movie, you creep me out or something, and I've never seen it. I might see it one day, but what you said about the movie definitely gets me interested to check it out. John, have you seen a Serbian film?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so my third favorite film was Black Swan, which we covered. My second favorite film was I Saw the Devil, which again we covered. But my first favorite film in 2010 was Beyond the Black Rainbow by Panos Cosmatos. This film is sort of borderline, whether it's horror, whether it's sci-fi. But to me, I was stunned by this film. I thought the imagery was amazing. It has this hypnotic kind of feel to the film. And again, I think it's in some ways a little bit Lovecraftian in the sense that the film really is about the search for knowledge, right? This sort of going beyond the known. And that sometimes I think we think of that as always being a good thing, but can that also be a bad thing sometimes? Can sort of the search for knowledge, going beyond what we expect, what the sort of, boundaries are, that can be horrible sometimes too. The consequences of that kind of search can bring out sort of positive things, but can also bring out negative things as well. And another thing I really liked about the film was the idea about how science can dominate, how science can control. We often think of science as being sort of, in some ways, neutral, right? In some ways that science is objective. But again, science was created by human beings. Human beings aren't objective. Human beings are subjective. So therefore, anything that they create is going to have the connection to the human. It's going to have ideological, personal sort of connections. And I think this film really sort of gets at that, about how science can be used to dominate, to control, to sort of, inflict pain and suffering on people. The last thing, too, is I loved Jeremy Schmidt's soundtrack. I thought the soundtrack was brilliant as well.
All right. Yeah, I haven't seen this one, but I really loved the director's later film, Mandy. But yeah, I definitely gotta check this out. John, have you seen this one?
No. Hey guys, I only have 3 movies for 2010. Piranha 3D, fun summer blockbuster action film.
Yeah, it was a fun movie. Yeah. It definitely didn't make my list, but it's a fun movie.
Yeah, I saw it in the theaters with my dad. We enjoyed it. We thought it was pretty fun. The effects were pretty cool and stuff. Definitely check it out. And Black Swan, which we talked about. I don't know if you guys have heard about Frozen's Adam Green and...
Yes, very good, yeah.
I know of it, but I haven't seen it.
Oh, it's really good. At first, it starts off a little slow, and eventually, once they get up on that
ski lift,
that ski lift, when they're stuck, that's where it gets really, really scary.
Yeah, I enjoyed that film as well.
Yeah, me too. Good.
Now we're on to the horror films from 2011. I only had 3 movies on my list. The first movie I want to talk about is the Ty West film, The Innkeepers, which I thought was a genuinely pretty creepy ghost film. He also directed House of the Devil, and I liked that movie a lot, but I actually think I might have liked The Innkeepers better. It's a really creepy film. I highly recommend it. Have you seen The Innkeepers?
I have, yes, and I enjoyed the film too. One of the things I really liked about it was that, again, the characters were really good, right? The young woman who works in the hotel, her friend, they weren't jerky characters. They didn't say things that seemed to be, cliches. I enjoyed it too, and I agree. I thought it was creepy. Maybe a little too slow for me in some ways. I wanted a little bit more movement of the plot. But yeah, I agree. It was a very good movie.
And John, I know you said you haven't seen any of the movies on my list, so...
Don't worry about me.
The next movie on my list is a little bit more of a mainstream ghost film, and that's Insidious, the James Wan film, which I really liked. I really did enjoy the first Insidious movie. But what do you think of Insidious?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was the greatest film I ever saw, but it was entertaining. So
yeah.
I thought it was fine.
The third movie on my list of my favorite horror films from 2011 is Attack the Block, a British horror comedy, which also has some drama in it as well. What I really love about this movie is how the people who stop the alien invasion are a bunch of juvenile delinquents. I just freaking love that concept, and it definitely calls to mind movies like Critters or Gremlins, even some elements of the Goonies in a way, even though these kids are a little more troubled than the kids from the Goonies, but it is a really, really fun movie. John Boyega is great in the movie. Bill, what do you think of Attack the Block?
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot too. I thought it was great. I think Nick Frost is great in it, right? He's got a role in it as well. But one of the things I really liked about it is I felt that there was some social commentary going on there. It might go over the heads of Americans because, this is a British film, but I think it has a lot to say about class as well, that this sort of, in England, the working class, don't really have the same kind of cachet as the middle or upper classes. And here you have a film where here's these, working class kids, they're on the dole, probably don't have a great future ahead of them. They're the ones that stop the invasion. So I thought that was really neat to say.
All right, now we'll go on to Bill's 2011 list.
Okay, so I have 4 films on my list. So my 4th favorite film of 2011 was Patrick Lucier's Drive Angry. I know that I usually really love intellectual horror films and out there horror films, but sometimes you just want a film with just action and you can turn your mind off and just devil worshippers getting run over by cars and shotguns and this movie was the perfect sort of result of that. Nick Cage, of course, is in it and he plays his usual sort of insane self, but this is a film that I again, it's a guilty pleasure, but I did enjoy seeing it.
Yeah, this is a movie I've heard nothing but good things about. Unfortunately, it didn't do too well because I think it was really mismarketed. The marketing for this, I think, kind of made it look almost like a Fast and the Furious kind of film. And actually, I didn't even know this movie had anything to do with the devil or anything until I saw some reviews on the film.
Okay, my 3rd favorite film was Hobo with a Shotgun, directed by Jason Eisner. Again, this was a result of Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez's film Grindhouse came out. There was a competition to come up with a fake trailer, and whoever came up with the best fake trailer would actually be given a contract to actually make the movie. And Jason Eisner came up with this concept of Hobo with a Shotgun. So it actually became a movie, and I thought the movie was really interesting. It's a very sort of grimy, it's a very sleazy type movie, definite throwback to the early 80s, a street trash type trauma kind of film, but actually done really well. I thought Rutger Hauer, of course, is great in it. They introduced this really interesting villains, the Plague, who are these interdimensional hitmen. So it's just again another fun movie that there's good gore in it. Again, another movie that you can kind of turn your mind off and you can just sort of enjoy for the sheer thrill of it.
Yeah, this is one I've heard a great deal about, but I still haven't seen, so I really can't contribute too much to this discussion.
All right, so my 2nd favorite film was Juan of the Dead, Alejandro Bruja's film about a zombie apocalypse in Cuba. And again, I know that, again, zombie films and sort of the whole zombie sort of genre has seemed to really become cliched now. And this was a very different type of zombie film. And it actually kind of reminded me of the original Dawn of the Dead and Shaun of the Dead in that the human characters were really important. You really got to know the human characters quite well. Again, I also thought there was a political metaphor here as well in terms of Cuba with the Castro government and how everybody, how the characters in the film want to leave Cuba because of the zombie outbreak. And of course, there's been a lot of sort of immigrants coming from, the political dissidents coming from Cuba. Yet in the film, they decide, instead of leaving, they decide to stay and make a better Cuba. So I thought that was an interesting political metaphor that sort of maybe perhaps Cubans are looking to the future post-Castro to sort of rebuild their country.
Yeah, I haven't seen this one. I don't even know if I've heard of it.
And my first favorite film, horror film of 2011, was the film We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lynn Ramsey. It's a really powerful film, really traces the development of a teenage murderer, of a teenager who goes on to do a school shooting. And it's a really powerful film. And the performances, Tilda Swinton, John C. Reilly, Ezra Miller plays the young man who grows up. And it's really sort of a difficult film in the sense that you have parents who don't know what to do with this kid. What do you do when you have a son that you could see is becoming a sociopath? what do you do about it? What are the resources? What, you want to love this child, yet you recognize that this child is not right in some ways. There's something really seriously wrong with this child. And the thing that I really liked about the film was that it had this, whereas a lot of films where there's a sort of a tragedy, people find some kind of meaning in tragedy, right? And that's the great thing about art, is that you can find some meaning in it. And in this film, sometimes there is no meaning in tragedy. Sometimes things just happen and you have to deal with the consequences of it. And I think this film really shows it. There's no sort of happy ending to this film. There's no greater sort of understanding or enlightenment that comes after the son becomes a murderer. They just have to sort of deal with it and go on, So again, to me, a very powerful film, very realistic. There's no supernatural, occult monsters in it, but something that is very prescient now, especially that school shootings have become even more, numerous as the decade went on.
Yeah, I haven't seen this, but I've heard nothing but good things about it. And John, you haven't seen any of the movies on Bill's list?
No, I haven't.
All right.
I would like to check them out at some point.
Okay, do you have any films from 2011?
No, not.
All right. So now on to 2012. I actually have only 2 horror movies on my list. The first is John Dies at the End, the film from Don Coscarelli. This is such a great freaking movie. It's such a wild film. It's so out there and batshit crazy. And it's a shame that Angus Scrimm died, because you know what? I could honestly see this movie being connected to Phantasm in some way. Like, I could see the characters from this movie meeting the characters from Phantasm. But, Bill, what do you think of John Dies at the End?
Well, it was my favorite horror film of 2012. I agree with you. I thought that Coscarelli did an awesome job. It totally harkens back to the surrealism of Phantasm, but in this, it just ratchets it up. It's like, it's funny, it's sick, it's fascinating. It's all this kind of weirdness coming together, and again, really likable characters, which I thought also made something like Phantasm such a great film. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a sort of a more out there, more adult version of Phantasm.
I do want to point out, I have this friend who was in a band called We Take Fire, and they actually did a song based on a line from this movie. They did a song called Damn That Dog Just Saved the Universe. I just want to point that out. But yeah, it's a great film. The next movie on my list is Chronicle, which is sort of a take on the found footage genre and the superhero genre. But I do think there are some definite horror elements in this movie. Like, it definitely reminded me of Carrie in a lot of ways. It reminded me of Akira in a lot of ways. But Chronicle, I think, is a really, really good movie. Have you seen Chronicle?
I have not, no.
John,
No.
have you seen... All right.
Okay, so I actually have 5 films from 2012. My 5th favorite film of 2012 was The Cabin in the Woods by Drew Goddard. Again, this has become famous as a sort of postmodern deconstruction of the horror genre. Now, while most deconstruction of the horror genre I can't stand because they talk down and ridicule horror and its fans, I'm looking at you, Scream. The film doesn't do that. I think it sort of shows a love for those films. Like, there's all these different monsters in the film. They even make it Lovecraftian with the ancient ones, and how horror films are connected to the sort of ritual sacrifices for, like, these Cthulhian kind of, like. So I thought they did a really good job. They did sort of do a deconstruction of those tropes that you see, but there was a reason for those tropes. There was a reason why you saw these things over and over again, because it was connected with these rituals. So I thought that was a cool idea.
Yeah, I haven't seen this movie. Honestly, I kind of had no interest because I related it so much to Scream. Because I'm kind of sick of these horror movies that, like, take the piss out of horror. It's just like, I feel like there's such a disrespect in the horror genre. And that's what kind of turned me off to it. But yeah, I'll check it out eventually.
I did see that. I saw this a long time ago. It was done by Josh Whedon, who going to do the Avengers, and it wasn't really like horrible. It wasn't really like one of my personal favorites. I mean, yeah, like they point out the cliches, and it made me think about like this: The Truman Show meets like Evil Dead to some degree.
My 4th favorite film was Sinister by Scott Derrickson. To be honest, I wasn't crazy about. It's weird. I wasn't crazy about the sort of the main narrative of the film, but what I loved about the film was the Super 8 home murder movies that sort of Ethan Hawke's character found. Like, those were really done really well. Like, and this might sound weird, but I can watch a whole movie of just those Super 8 sort of short, sort of like, amateur home murder movies. The other thing I really liked about Sinister was the use of music. It's a really sort of like a connection where there is a score by I think Christopher Young does the score, but they also stitched in all these different other songs. Like they use music from Boards of Canada, they use music from Ulver, music from Aghast, and they made a really sort of creepy sort of melange of all these kind of musics coming together. So that's basically what I like about it: the soundtrack and also the sort of creepy home movies that Ethan Hawke finds.
Yeah, I still haven't seen Sinister. It's funny. There's a lot of movies that some people might be surprised I still haven't seen yet, and Sinister is one I still need to check out.
I saw this too. It was alright. I feel like most of it is like more of like a murder mystery where he's like trying to find out like all the evidence of how like these family died. That the ending was like the best part of it, like when it like all like, even though it's been a while since I've seen it, but the ending like really freaked me out. I will say that though. My
third favorite film of 2012 was a movie called The Bay, directed by Barry Levinson, of course, who has directed a lot of dramas. Right, he's not really well known for horror films, but he actually was very concerned about the pollution that was going into the Chesapeake Bay. And what he wanted to do is he wanted to make a documentary about it. But then another show called Frontline already made a documentary about it. So what he decided to do was to make a horror film about it to also address these issues of all this pollution. So again, another trope that we've seen, I think, in 2010 horror is environmental horror, right? Where we're finding out more and more about climate change, we're finding more and more about sort of, the corporate responsibility for so much pollution. So this film is a found footage film, but what's interesting about it is that it shows how different characters are affected. So there's not just one narrative. There's different people who are affected by it. So you learn about, a doctor, a professor, so and it's stitched together in a way in which, some of the stuff is done with regular digital cameras. Some of it's done through Skype. Some of it's done through phone. So I thought just the way it was put together, and this idea of having this plague and these parasites, they did it in a very realistic way. They didn't overdo it. And I think Levinson did a really good job of raising this awareness about sort of, what we're doing to our environment by using the horror metaphor.
This is one I still need to see, but I do think the best kind of horror films are the ones that are making a statement about something that's wrong in our society. That's one of the reasons why the original Godzilla is my favorite film of all time. John, have you seen The Bay?
No.
My second favorite film of 2012 was Prometheus, Ridley Scott's Prometheus. Again, I know that there's a lot of people who sort of saw this was mediocre, a lot of people who said that, they didn't care for it. I can't help it. I'm a sucker for the Alien franchise. The Alien franchise is like my favorite franchise, and I was dying to find out the backstory of the xenomorphs and the backstory of the space jockeys. So I was totally sort of hooked. I was a total sucker for this film, but I really enjoyed it. I did really sort of recapture some of the awe and wonder of the first Alien film.
I liked Prometheus, but not enough to really put it on a list of my favorite horror films. I mean, it's definitely an interesting film. The one thing I do like about it is sort of this idea of, okay, are the engineers, like, you almost get this sense that maybe they're angels, or maybe this is where we got the idea of angels from. There's definitely something very Lovecraftian about it, especially at the Mountains of Madness. It definitely reminded me of that.
I agree, and I think that's why, like, when people say that the first Alien is Lovecraftian, I'm like, do you really understand what Lovecraftian really means? Prometheus, that was Lovecraftian. That is a Lovecraftian film. If you know anything about Lovecraft's philosophy and his sort of, his concerns and themes, then absolutely, I agree with you. I think that Prometheus is 100 times more Lovecraftian than the first Alien.
It was alright. I only saw it once. I didn't really necessarily hate it. I kind of agree. It wasn't one of my favorite films of the decade of horror movies. And yeah, I'm a sucker bunch too. I love the Alien films a lot, but I feel like the film left with a lot of questions and cliffhangers of what we didn't get out of it. And I also was a little bit upset we didn't get to see the xenomorphs, but what are you gonna do?
And then my first favorite film, as Christian has already alluded to, was John Dies at the End.
So now on to our list of our favorite horror films from 2013. I only have 3 on my list, but the first movie I want to talk about is the Evil Dead remake. I actually really enjoyed this. It's funny because it's kind of both a remake and sort of a sequel in a way. It's done in such a way where you could argue that maybe it's set within the same universe as at least the first Evil Dead movie. It does seem to be ignoring the continuity of the other 2 movies. At the same time, continuity was never really a big thing with the Evil Dead franchise. I have kind of a fan theory that the Evil Dead universe is kind of a multiverse where you have different events taking place in different parallel universes, but it's done in a way where you could connect it to the original franchise. And I know there were plans of having the main girl from this movie eventually meet Ash in a later film, but I really did love the Evil Dead remake / sequel. What do you think of this one?
It's my fourth favorite film of 2013. I loved it too. One of the things I loved about it was, obviously this has been a big decade for reboots and remakes, and one of the things that really just frustrated me about these films is that they're so conservative. They play it so safe in these films. They're so middle of the road. And, like, they don't want to offend people. They want to keep the brand going, so they're not going to sort of, mess with the formula too much. And then what's the point of doing a remake or a reboot? That's why I love Fede Alvarez came to this film and just went nuts, went dog nuts in this film, and just took all the great things we liked about Evil Dead and just pushed them even farther out. So this is the only remake I love because it didn't play it safe. It wasn't conservative. It was like anarchy. I loved it. I thought it was great. The score was amazing with the use of the sirens that really sort of got you on edge. I thought they did an awesome job with this film.
And it's just a brutal film too. Like, the character of David, you see what happens to him throughout the movie. That poor guy is just being freaking tortured by the demons throughout the whole film. It's great.
I mean, one of the things, nobody was safe in this film. Nobody was safe in this film. Everybody, you know what I mean? At any moment, anything could happen to anybody in the film, and that's what I thought was so brilliant about it. With a lot of these remakes, you know who the hero's going to be. You know who's going to be the people who are killed. It's just it's so formulaic. This film took the formula and just threw it out the window.
Yeah, what do you think of the Evil Dead remake?
Well, I'll admit I haven't seen it, but I do have a few comments on why, because one, I'm just sick and tired of how Hollywood is butchering remakes to death, and it's just annoying me so much. But I've heard a lot of good things about it, but I'm still a little skeptical because it's not going to be the same without Bruce Campbell. But at the same time, maybe I'll give it a shot just for curiosity. And I don't know, it sounds pretty good. Maybe I'll check it out at some point if I'm in the mood.
Okay, so the next movie on my list is James Wan's The Conjuring, which I thought was a really good movie. It was a really good throwback to 70s horror. My only issue with the film is it does get the final exorcism scene does get a little over the top, I think. But overall, I really enjoyed The Conjuring. What do you think of this one?
I did too. I enjoyed it. I thought it hit all the marks for a good horror film. I don't think it reinvented anything or really did anything different. But yeah, no, it was really good. I thought Lily Taylor's always awesome. She's an awesome actress. The Warrens, Patrick Wilson,
yeah,
right? They were good. It was, like I said, a solidly well-made horror film.
It is supposedly based on a true story, but that depends on how much credibility you give the Warrens' cases. And I know a lot of people, I'm not saying how I feel about them one way or the other, but I know a lot of people who considered the Warrens to be frauds.
Yeah, I don't know either. I'm a skeptic myself, even though I love the supernatural and the occult and everything. I'm more of a sort of, show me kind of person. It's got to happen to me to believe it. But again, I don't think that sort of takes away from the film at all. It's a great film. If you wanted just an old school, like you said, an old school horror flick that just hits all the right spots.
I enjoyed it. It was really good. I liked Vera Farmiga, if I'm saying it right.
Vera Farmiga.
I loved her performance as
Lorraine Warren.
Yeah,
Lorraine Warren and Patrick Wilson, and it was a fun film. I enjoyed it a lot.
So the next movie on my list of my favorite horror films from 2013 is a movie that you could debate whether or not it's a horror film. Some people might say this is more of a psychological thriller, and I normally hate when people say that, because normally when people say, oh, it's not a horror film, it's a thriller, usually they're just saying that because they're too embarrassed to admit they liked a horror film. I think this has enough elements of psychological horror where I could say, yeah, I could count it as horror, but I could also understand somebody saying that it's not really horror. But the next movie on my list is Enemy with Jake Gyllenhaal. This is a really, really interesting film. It's a film where you definitely kind of have to make your own interpretation of what's going on. It's directed by, I can't pronounce the director's name, but it's the same guy who directed Prisoners and Blade Runner 2049, and he's directing the new adaptation of Dune. But yeah, this is a very interesting film about a history teacher who discovers he has a doppelganger, and the whole film is sort of this like mind game between him and his doppelganger. But yeah, it's an excellent film. Have you seen Enemy?
I have not, but it sounds very interesting. I have not seen it.
I haven't seen either, but I'll check it out sometime.
Okay, well, I thought 2013 was an excellent year for horror films in the 2010s. So I actually have 6 films on my list that I really enjoyed. So the 6th film is Frankenstein's Army, Richard Raforst's found footage film about a band of Russian soldiers during World War II that stumble across this like weird Nazi technology and experimentation. And I'm a sucker for any sort of weird Nazi technology kind of films or Nazi occult films and everything, Nazi zombies and all that kind of stuff. So I thought this was really good. I thought it was very entertaining. I thought that the sort of monsters that the Doctor creates were really interesting in terms of imagery. It's kind of brought together some like steampunk kind of like World War II technology being fused together. So again, another just an enjoyable film.
Yeah, I haven't seen this one.
Me neither. I haven't seen it yet either.
My 5th favorite film was Witching and Bitching by Alex de la Iglesia. This movie is the ultimate sort of, battle of the sexes, patriarchy versus matriarchy. You have the sort of, the witches versus the men. And again, it's a satire as well about the whole sort of the idea of gender and the idea of masculinity and femininity. And Alex de la Iglesia, he's a great director, right? He's made, other films that are really good. And so I was glad to see him back making films again.
Yeah, this one I didn't see. I did hear about it, but I haven't seen it.
I haven't heard of half these films so far that we're talking about. That's okay, go on.
My 4th favorite film was the Evil Dead remake, which we talked about. And then my 3rd favorite film was a film called Barbarian Sound Studio, directed by Peter Strickland. Very interesting film. It's about a guy who's a sound technician for the movies. Toby Jones plays him, who's of course is a brilliant actor who's in The Mist and quite a number of other films. Who goes to Italy to do sound for this, you're not really quite sure what kind of movie, because you never really see the movie he's working on. It's called The Equestrian Vortex. And it sounds like it's a kind of a cross between like Suspiria and a Giallo. It's about this riding academy where there's witches that are trying to get the kids. You only hear like bits and pieces of the film. And what happens is he's the sound engineer who becomes so immersed in his work, it sort of drives him mad. He goes crazy. He starts thinking things are happening to him that he hears in the film that are actually happening to him. So I thought it was a really great film. Of course, I'm a huge Italian horror fan, so this was sort of a tribute to Italian horror. And also, the soundtrack was brilliant, too, by the group Broadcast that did the soundtrack for this. So, Barbarian Sound Studio, I thought was a really, really great film.
Yeah, and this one I haven't seen.
Me neither.
Okay, my second favorite film of 2013, and I guess it's debatable whether it came out in 2013, 2014. I'm going to say 2013 was Jonathan Glazer's Under the Skin. A film about an alien who takes on the form of a woman to sort of experience what it's like to live on Earth. Scarlett Johansson actually is quite good in the role. One of the things I always had a knock against Scarlett Johansson is I feel that she doesn't really have an affect. She doesn't. Her face really doesn't change. She doesn't have like too much emotion. But I thought this was perfect for this film, And I just thought that the imagery of the film was fascinating. And the metaphor of the film, of this idea of, again, women in patriarchal society, that women in a male-dominated society are like aliens. They are trapped in their bodies. They are judged and evaluated for their bodies. So, again, I thought it was a very interesting film in terms of the metaphor for the alienation of women by making the woman an alien in the film. I also thought the score was amazing, too. Mika Levy's score for the film was really unearthly.
Yeah, I agree. This is a great movie. It's actually on my list, but I counted it as a 2014 film. But yeah, it's one thing I really think is interesting about it is you see her driving around in this like truck, this sort of like rape van, if you will. And I think that's interesting. It's kind of a reverse on the gender because she's going to basically kidnap men, whereas usually it's the man driving those kinds of trucks to kidnap women. And also, since she's an alien, you could say that's this movie's version of the UFO or something. But it's a fascinating film, and it's such a surreal, almost dreamlike film. I definitely, if you haven't seen Under the Skin, I definitely recommend it.
The scenes where she actually has sex with the men, and they go into that weird like other dimension, and they're like submerged, and it was really, really fascinating. Like I said, it was like horrifying yet beautiful. at the same time. So yeah, I love that. I thought Under the Skin was brilliant. My first favorite film of 2013, again, another film that was controversial, people either hated it, was The Lords of Salem by Rob Zombie. I'm a fan of Rob Zombie's films. I really liked House of a Thousand Corpses. I really like Devil's Rejects. I haven't seen the Three from Hell one yet, but I do like his films. And this film I thought was, I love witchcraft films. Witchcraft films are like, that and Satanist films are like my favorite kind of horror films. So I really, really love this film. I thought that his approach to the film, again, really pushed the boundaries. It really sort of tried to do different things. The performances in the film, that's one thing about Rob Zombie. He employs great actors. He finds these great actors and actresses. I thought Sherry Moon Zombie was actually quite good in the film. I know a lot of people have criticized her performances, but I thought she was very good. Ken Foree was awesome, but he's always awesome in these films. But who really blew my mind in this film was Meg Foster as Margaret Morgan, the evil witch. She was unbelievable. She was so great in this film. And again, I thought it was just visually overwhelming. And I love to see horror films that really transcend, that really push the boundaries, that try to do things different and new. Okay. Now, did everything work in the film? Maybe not, but at least he was trying. At least he was trying something different. He was pushing. He was experimenting, and that's the direction I think the genre really needs to go in.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen Lords of Salem yet, but it's another one that I know people are kind of polarized on. I know there are people like you who really love it, and then I've heard some people say, "Oh, it's the worst horror film ever made." John, what do you think of?
I'm not a Rob Zombie fan. Sorry. Okay, again, not gonna go in specific order about 2013 favorites. The Conjuring was one we already talked about that. The first Purge, I don't think it wasn't that bad. I mean, it wasn't great. It was like a Home Alone type Asian type of film. And Oculus, did you see Oculus?
I have not seen Oculus.
Oh, really, really good. Check it out. It's about like these like two kids who, when they grow up, they find the mirror that's supposed to what like haunted the house, and also what made their father go like crazy. It was really, really good.
Yes, I saw Oculus as well. Yes, I thought it was good as well.
Yes.
So now on to our list of our favorite horror films from 2014. I'll start with my list. The first movie, and again, these are in no specific order, the first movie I want to talk about was actually my favorite film from 2014, and that was The Babadook, the Jennifer Kent film. I thought this was a really, really damn good film. What I loved about it wasn't just a horror film, it was also very much a drama. It was a drama about grief, and it was about this woman really trying to deal with her grief and overcome her grief, and those are my favorite kinds of horror films where the monster is really more of a metaphor. In this case, the monster is a metaphor for both her grief but also her mental illness. I really loved The Babadook. What did you think of this one?
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. Maybe I didn't love it as much as other people have done, but I thought it was a solidly made horror film. And again, it brought a sort of seriousness to horror films. I think a lot of times people dismiss horror films as being juvenile, as being immature, as being about lightweight kind of things, or having no intellectual substance to them. But I thought this film did a really good job with that.
John, what did you think of The Babadook?
I mean, it wasn't. I didn't really hate. I just wasn't like I agree with Bill. I didn't really give as much like praise like everyone else did. Like I did like Essie Davis' performance in the film. She did an amazing job for that. I'm surprised she wasn't nominated for an Academy Award for that. And the kid was just I mean, not like annoying, like he was just like not bad acting. You thought that the kid was going to be like the one that was going to be like the villain or something, but it turned out to be the opposite.
The next movie on my list for my favorite horror films of 2014 is The Purge: Anarchy, which I think is the best of the Purge franchise, and I liked all of the Purge movies for the most part. I would say my least favorite is honestly the first one, but I think this is easily the best of the franchise. It really does explore the world that the Purge movies take place in. It's also, it definitely reminded me of stuff like Escape from New York and even Assault on Precinct 13 to a certain degree. What do you think of The Purge: Anarchy?
Yeah, very entertaining. I agree with you. It's a very entertaining film. It's fun. It's a fun film. It's entertaining. I think that they sort of, the satire, the satiric kind of thrust of the film could go a little bit deeper. But no, it was good. I enjoyed it.
I agree. This was actually my favorite The Purge film because I liked Frank Grillo's character because he was very sympathetic. He was purging, but you understood why he was purging. He wasn't purging like just going out to kill people. He was purging because he wanted to purge the guy who killed his son. Definitely the best one of them because of Frank Grillo's performance.
So the next movie I want to talk about is The Guest, which is a great action horror film from Adam Weingard, who also directed You're Next and Blair Witch, the most recent Blair Witch movie. He's going to be directing the remake of King Kong vs. Godzilla. The Guest is probably my favorite of his movies. Have you seen this one?
No, I have not. I have not seen it.
No, haven't seen it.
All right. And the next movie on my list we already talked about was Under the Skin, which I'm counting as a 2014 movie. And I pretty much said all I needed to say when I was talking about the movie with Bill. It's a great movie. John, have you seen Under the Skin?
I have not, but I've only heard good things about it. I would like to see it at some point.
Okay, so for my 2014 films, my fifth favorite film in 2014 was As Above, So Below, directed by John Eric Dowdle. Again, it's a found footage film, but it takes place in the catacombs of Paris, under the streets of Paris. So first of all, I thought that was a cool environment, a cool sort of setting for a horror film. The other reason I really liked it was that the film itself is very informed by occult tradition and occult practices and the history of the occult. So I thought that was cool. Like most horror films that deal with the occult don't get that much into the history of it and the authenticity of the practices or the beliefs. And I thought this film did a really good job with that.
Yeah, I remember seeing parts of this, but honestly, I don't remember much of the movie. I wasn't really paying attention at the time. I definitely gotta give this movie a second chance, I think. Have you seen this one?
No.
My fourth favorite film of 2014 was Rec 4 Apocalypse. The whole Rec series for me was very entertaining. I thought it was an interesting, very different take on the whole demonic possession trope. And I thought that this film really brought the franchise to a satisfying end.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of the Rec films. I haven't seen the American remakes of them either. Have you seen this one?
No.
My third favorite film from 2014 is a film called Starry Eyes. And it really sort of shows the horrific side of the whole culture industry. It's about this aspiring actress that finds out how much you have to sacrifice in order to make it in Hollywood. And again, I think this is another film that really comes out of the whole attention to sort of feminist issues and concerns in society. And again, it takes the whole sort of trope of selling your soul to be famous, that Faustian sort of bargain. It takes it to a whole nother level in this film.
Yeah, this is one I really need to check out. I actually have it on DVD, but I just never gotten around to watching it. I really should, though. Have you seen this one?
No, but it sounds pretty good. I'd like to check it out.
My second favorite film. Now, I'm not sure if it came out in 2014 or 2015. It might be one of those things that it was shown in 2014 but wasn't released in 2015. But I'm going to count it as 2014, and that was It Follows, which I imagine Christian's probably going to have a lot to say as well because I know he enjoys the film. David Robert Mitchell's film. Again, I thought it was an amazing film. It reminded me very much of Stanley Kubrick, where there was a sort of this distance to the action and the characters in the film, the way the camera sort of slowly moved into what they were doing. Again, very much reminded me of Stanley Kubrick, who's like my favorite filmmaker. I also thought, I know that the film focuses a lot on the sort of sexual anxiety, but to me, I mean, it even expands out of that, the existential horror, the dread of existence, that there is something following all of us, death, our mortality is following all of us. It doesn't matter if you have sex or not have sex, something is always following us, So again, I thought of a film that sort of, again, transcended just the sort of physical and went to sort of the metaphysical, went to sort of these larger questions about sort of existence and larger questions about the meaning of life and things like that.
Oh yeah, It Follows was probably, I'm counting it as a 2015 movie, so it's going to be on my list when we get to 2015, but It Follows, that was like my second favorite film of that year. Do see the creatures almost being a metaphor for death itself. Like, you could almost see the creatures being a take on the Grim Reaper in some sense. And I love that the film never attempts to explain what this creature is. It's totally up to your own interpretation. You don't know if it's a demon or some kind of ghost. Maybe it's an alien. I also like how the film seems to take place in sort of an alternate universe where it seems like it's the 1980s. At the same time, there's some modern technology mixed in with older technology. Like, it's set in a very ambiguous time frame.
Absolutely, yeah, and that makes it unsettling in and of itself.
I think it would be a sin not to talk about the score for this movie.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I know it sort of it sort of kickstarted that whole sort of synth wave kind of like harken back to sort of the 80s use of synthesizers that now you see in so many horror films now.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely liked It Follows. It was definitely a great concept, but also like it wasn't like necessarily like a killer follows. Like I was a little confused about that too, like the time. Like I couldn't tell like whether this was like 80s or 90s, especially with the technology, and I also like that actress.
Micah Monroe.
Micah Monroe. Loved her in the film. I definitely would like to see her more stuff like that.
And my favorite horror film of 2014 was David Cronenberg's Maps to the Stars. Again, it's one of those films where you don't need a supernatural or apocalyptic events or the occult to make a devastating horror film. This is a film about the price of fame and success in the culture industry, where you have to sacrifice your humanity to be famous. You become a thing, a dehumanized and dehumanizing sort of monster. And in this film, all you get are characters that are selfish, narcissistic, they're empty. Everything for them is image and facade. There's no compassion. There's no empathy for everything. There's no love for anybody. The only thing you have in here is self-love. But these people are so self-loathing and so disgusted by themselves, they can't even love themselves. Again, it's a devastating film about the power and about what that power, fame, and success does to people, wealth. And again, I think that Cronenberg is one of the all-time great genre directors. And in this film, even though it's not your typical kind of horror sci-fi film that he's known for, I think this is probably his most horrifying film.
Yeah, I haven't seen this one yet. It's not really considered to be a horror film by a lot of people, so I think it's interesting that you did put it on the list.
I found it a terrifying film because these people are real. These people are in our society right now. They're not monsters. They're not aliens. These people are real. Because it's so real, that's what I found it terrifying.
I only have one favorite film of 2014 of horror film, The Purge Anarchy.
All right, so now on to my list of my favorite horror films from 2015. The first movie I want to talk about is one we already talked about, and that's It Follows, and I pretty much said all I needed to say. I will say the movie does also remind me a lot of the original Nightmare on Elm Street in a lot of regards. Like, I think it does touch on some of the same themes and even some of the same ideas as the original Nightmare on Elm Street. In fact, if you wanted to, you could call this a spiritual remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, and it's a better remake than the actual Nightmare on Elm Street remake. What do you think of my comparison between those two movies?
Yeah, very interesting. Absolutely. The teenage anxiety about sex, about growing up. Yeah, I could see that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then the next movie on my list is Krampus, the Christmas-themed horror comedy. I absolutely love the shit out of this movie. I did a review on it a few years ago if you want to check it out. What do you think of Krampus?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was good. I enjoyed it a lot. I thought they got good actors for it. I think the story was good. The imagery of like the monsters and stuff in the movie were good. Yeah, it was very enjoyable.
It reminded me a lot of Demonic Toys in a lot of ways.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Actually, I was not really a fan of it that much. I like the way, like, the look of it, the visuals, but I didn't really care much for the story. I didn't really care much for the characters. They were not that likable, sympathetic. When they were all, like, either they did die in the end, they're not. It's like, it wasn't really that big of a loss. And also, it was done by, what's his name, Doherty.
Michael Dougherty or Dougherty. I'm not really sure how to say his last name.
Anyway, that guy did Trick or Treat. I think that's a way better film than Krampus, in my opinion.
The next movie on my list is one that you could definitely debate whether or not it's horror. I mean, it's definitely a science fiction film, but I do think it has some definite horror elements, and that's Ex Machina. And what I really like about this movie, what I really think is interesting about it, is it's really a study on male vulnerability. Have you seen this one?
Actually, I have not, but I've heard a lot of good things about it, but I have not seen it.
Same, I haven't seen it, but I heard a lot of good things about it too.
And the next movie I want to talk about is a movie I saw in 2015, and I remember when I did my best films of 2015 list, for some reason I left it off, and I don't really know why, because I actually do really dig this movie, and that's Guillermo del Toro's Crimson Peak, which really does remind me of, like, a Hammer film. It feels like Guillermo del Toro doing a Hammer film. What do you think of this?
You know, I'll be honest with you, I did like the film, but I was a little bit disappointed. Maybe I just have very high expectations for Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah.
And I just felt that, I don't know, and again, maybe it's not no fault of the film itself, only what I brought to the film, and so I was a little disappointed in it, but I did enjoy it.
I haven't seen it, but I keep hearing, like, mixed opinions about it, but I'm still going to watch it anyway for the sake of it, for my own opinion, to see if I'll maybe enjoy it or not.
The next movie I want to talk about is one that I initially kept off the list because I wasn't sure if it would qualify as a horror film, but I thought about it more, and you know what? I could count this movie as horror, and that's Joel Edgerton's The Gift, which is a brilliant stalker thriller, and it was one of my favorite films of 2015. Not even just horror films, but it was one of my favorite films in general. And Joel Edgerton's performance in this movie is both creepy but strangely sympathetic as well.
I have 5 films for 2015. My 5th favorite film, horror film of 2015, is a film called The Atticus Institute, directed by Chris Sparling. This is a pseudo-documentary. It takes place during the 70s. And these government agents are investigating a woman that apparently has telekinetic powers. What you find out is that she's actually possessed. And I love these films, like the secret government projects on the occult, and I love those kind of things, so I did enjoy this film a lot.
Yeah, this one I don't even think I've heard of. I'll definitely try to check it out. Have you seen or heard of this?
My next favorite film, my 4th favorite film, horror film of 2015, was The Mind's Eye by Joe Begos. This is sort of like a punk rock version of Scanners. It's a total 80s throwback. The score by Steve Moore is another one of those kind of synth wave ones, kind of like from It Follows. There's a lot of gore in it. So it's almost like Scanners with more gore but less kind of philosophy in it.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of this one, but I'll definitely check it out.
Okay, so my 3rd favorite horror film of 2015. Again, people might not classify this as horror, but I thought it was a really devastatingly terrifying film, and that's the film Room. Lenny Abrahamson's, Oscar award-winning, Brie Larson, I think, won the Oscar for her performance. And again, what I really liked, it was a horrific, very real life, women have been held captive by men. There was the guy in Cleveland, I believe. Was it Cleveland?
Yes, Cleveland. Actually, my friend went to school right by there, and he said that he used to pass by that house all the time.
Right. It's just horrible to realize that there are people in our society that are so detached from humanity. They could do that to another human being, treat another human being like a thing, like something that doesn't deserve the same sort of rights and life that everybody else does. And the other thing I really liked about the film too is that I think most films, the end of the film would have been them being freed from the room, and yet in this film that happened about halfway or a quarter way through the film. The rest of the film really is about the consequences of living with real life horror. How does one live the rest of your life after going through something that traumatic? And Brie Larson in the film almost commits suicide, the guilt she feels. It was a really harrowing film. But again, it's a good film in the end, that it does come out on a positive note at the end of the film.
Yeah, I absolutely loved Room. I wouldn't classify it as a horror film per se, but I do think it's an amazing drama film. I also read the book as well. The book's really good as well. Room is an excellent film. Again, I'm not really sure if I would classify it as horror, but I do believe that genre can be a matter of opinion. Have you seen Room?
I haven't seen it, but I do see the horror behind it, though, like what Bill pointed out.
My second favorite film, horror film of 2015, is a movie called Evolution by Lucille Hadjaholevich, I think her name is. It's a French film, and it's a really bizarre film. It kind of reminds me of Shadow over Innsmouth, if it was done from a feminine perspective. It's very much a film about transformation, about birth, about motherhood, and the sea is a major metaphor in the film because they're on an island. There's it's a colony of just women and little boys on this island. And so there's this fear and awe of the sea, but I think that sort of translates over to the fear and awe we have of procreation and of sex. Because in the film, the little boys are being impregnated, these things are being put inside them it's a really bizarre film, but a really eerie, very unsettling film. And again, another film that I love because it doesn't give you all the answers. You don't know why these people are on this island. You don't know why they're being having to suffer these experimentation. But again, very eerie, unsettling film.
Have you seen this one?
No.
Yeah, this is one I haven't even heard of, but I'm definitely going to try to check it out.
And then, again, I think this is one that I think it might have premiered in 2015, but then was released in 2016, and that, of course, is Robert Eggers' The Witch, right? Which, again, is just an absolute brilliant film, right? Very much in the kind of folk horror genre. And I think one of the things that you have to remember about the folk horror genre, what makes the folk horror genre so important, is that the real focus of folk horror is on the family and on the community. It's not so much on the monster or the occult or the cults and things like that. But it's a film about family. The film's about community, about the bonds, the bonds that sort of exist, and how fragile those things really are. But how these intrusions of the supernatural, these intrusions of the monstrous, really break those bonds of family and the community. I love films that have transcendent moments in it. Of course, the end of the film has that sort of definitely that transcendent moment in the film. And again, the score was brilliant. Just an absolutely fabulous film.
Yeah, I love this film too, but I'm counting it as a 2016 film, so it's going to be on my list for 2016. And honestly, I'm going to save what I have to say for it when we get to 2016. John, have you seen The Witch?
No.
So, John, we'll go to your favorite films of 2015.
I only have two. One, It Follows, and have any of you seen The Final Girls?
No, I haven't seen
It
this.
was like a parody of like the Friday the 13th films where this girl's mother was like a famous like 80s horror actress, and she died, and every year they keep like re-releasing the film for the anniversary, and they end up getting stuck in the film. They keep repeating the film over and over again until they get the movie right.
All right.
Still, it's fun, entertaining.
So now on to my list of my favorite horror films from 2016. The first movie I want to talk about is The Witch, which I'm counting as a 2016 film, and I agree with everything Bill said about this. This is a brilliant and very creepy horror film. But another theme I saw in the film is sort of this idea of, to me, the film's very much a statement about how society views women, and you see that with the character of... Is the character's name Thomason or something?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, like, you see this whole family turn on her and start accusing her of being the witch, which you very much saw in society. And I really feel like the real problem in the film is not so much the devil or any of the supernatural stuff. The real problem is the fact that this family could not come together. They could not come together to try to fight whatever this evil was out in this woods. And really the true evil was from themselves.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think it very... insightful to say about absolutely the sort of scapegoating of women, right? And that's endemic of many societies, that women are seen as the bad people, the corruptors. Even before you were talking about the Garden of Eden, right? Isn't Eve blamed for that, right? The corruption of being kicked out of the Garden of Eden. So yeah, I totally I agree very much with you. I think that this film really is about sort of and the fact that the protagonist is a young girl going into womanhood, right? On that sort of precipice of going into being an adult, where she'll have even more responsibilities, even more things projected onto her. So yeah, and also too that sort of witchcraft has always been seen as something as female empowerment. One of the reasons why men are so against witches, right, is because it's female empowerment, right, not male empowerment.
I also saw some parallels, at least with the father in the family, because his views don't reflect the views of his colony in the beginning of the film. Him and his family are outcasts from the colony. I saw some parallels between that and the story of Lucifer being outcast from heaven, which is why it's kind of ironic that Lucifer ends up being a character in the movie.
Yeah, very much so.
The next movie on my list of my favorite horror films from 2016 is 10 Cloverfield Lane, the sort of spiritual sequel to Cloverfield. This is one that I really, really loved, and what I really loved about it is even though there are monsters like outside of this bunker, even though there is an alien invasion going on, the true villain of the film is John Goodman's character. Like, the monsters really are almost not even the scariest part of this film. What do you think of 10 Cloverfield Lane?
I thought it was okay. I saw it in the movies when it came out. It kind of reminded me of kind of like a overblown Twilight Zone episode. Like, I've kind of seen this done like on like the Twilight Zone. Rod Serling had sort of things about paranoia. I thought it was okay.
All right.
I still haven't seen it. I really wasn't really much of a fan of the first movie, really, so...
The next movie I want to talk about is Nicholas Winding Refn's The Neon Demon. And what I really liked about this is it honestly felt like if Dario Argento and Bret Easton Ellis worked on a project together. Like, it really felt like Bret Easton Ellis writes a Dario Argento film. What do you think of Neon Demon?
Well, it was my third favorite horror film of 2016. I love Neon Demon. I love Nicholas Winding Refn's films. I love his style. I love that you enter into his world when you see his films, which I think the best filmmakers have that effect on you. You're in their world. It has nothing to do with realism or anything. You're in their world. And yeah, I agree. And I think this is another film about the price of fame, about sort of the search for perfection, the idea of the image being more important than anything deeper, right? Yeah, I agree. I thought Neon Demon was brilliant. I wish that Nicholas Winding Refn had directed the Suspiria remake. I think he would have been an amazing director for that.
Yeah, have you seen Neon Demon?
Yes, I did. I saw it a while ago. It was pretty good, and it definitely reminded me a little bit of like Argento and I thought, what's her name? Ellie Fanning was really amazing in that movie, and definitely, yeah.
Yeah, there were also some shots in the movie that felt very Michael Mann-esque as well.
I guess.
Yeah, I think so. The whole neon, the whole neon motif, right, very much reminds me of quite a few of Mann's films.
The next movie I want to talk about is Green Room, an absolutely brutal film with Patrick Stewart and Anton Yelchin. Anton Yelchin, who I thought was a very underrated actor, and he actually died shortly after this movie came out, unfortunately. The film's about a punk band who gets a gig at this club run by neo-Nazis, and they end up witnessing a murder. It's really about this punk band trying to survive, and it's just a brutal, unrelenting film. Have you seen this one?
I haven't, but it sounds great. I'm definitely going to check it out.
I haven't seen it, but I'm going to check it out myself, too.
Yeah, it's also really cool seeing Patrick Stewart actually play a villain in this. Like, you wouldn't think Patrick Stewart would play a neo-Nazi, but he plays a really good neo-Nazi in this.
That's great.
Wow.
That's great.
The next movie I want to talk about is The Conjuring 2, which I happen to really enjoy. I mean, I like James Wan's films for the most part, and I thought Conjuring 2 was a really good, solid horror film, but it also had some really good character drama in it, and there were moments where it was actually kind of sweet. I liked Conjuring 2. What do you think of this one?
I thought it was okay. Some of the parts I thought dragged a little bit, sort of lagged a little bit, but it wasn't bad. I think it was a solid horror film.
I still haven't seen it yet.
The next movie on my list is Blair Witch, the third film in the Blair Witch franchise, and I know a lot of people did not like this one, and don't get me wrong, it's nowhere near as good or as groundbreaking as the original Blair Witch Project, but still, I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was a solid follow-up to the original film. What do you think of Blair Witch?
I agree with you. I thought it was a solid follow-up. I really liked the whole mythos, the whole Blair Witch mythos, so it was cool to see. It was definitely a sequel that I did not see coming. I thought that sort of after the second one, that was pretty much it with this whole, with the whole franchise. But yeah, I enjoyed it.
Have you seen this one?
Yeah, it was alright, man. I like the idea of the concept, how like the siblings go out to find like their missing siblings, which I thought was a great idea. I'm like, this should have been the idea for the second film that we should have gotten at that time, but it was alright. I mean, not the best.
And the next movie on my list is Shin Godzilla. There are Godzilla films that I think can classify as horror, and I think this is one of them because if you look at the subtext of this movie, it's freaking terrifying. This is a movie really making a statement about nuclear power and everything that could go wrong with nuclear power. I know some people didn't like it, and I could get why, because there is a lot of satire in the film that you might only get if you're from Japan, but yeah, I really loved Shin Godzilla.
I'm embarrassed to say I have not seen it yet, and I'm a huge Godzilla fan, so I'm dying to see it. I definitely have to see it.
I just got it for Christmas. I still haven't seen it. I'm still interested in watching it at some point.
The next movie I want to talk about is one that I completely forgot about when I was recording this video with John and Bill. So this little section of the video is being recorded afterwards, but the movie I forgot to talk about was The Wailing. Now, The Wailing is a South Korean horror film about a stranger who comes to this small village, and this stranger may very well be the devil himself, and when he comes to this village, some really bad shit starts happening. But it's a brilliant movie, and it's a movie that really does mess around with tone and genre. Like, it kind of starts out as a black comedy, but it progressively gets more and more serious and more dark, and the ending is just so heartbreaking and so brutally nihilistic. It's a demonic possession / exorcism film. It also becomes a zombie film at one point. Like, it really does mess around with a couple of different genres, but does it in a way that makes sense, where it never feels convoluted.
So for 2016, I only have 4 favorite horror films. My 4th favorite horror film was a film called The Autopsy of Jane Doe by Andre Overdale, I believe his name is. He also directed Scary Stories, right? The new Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. He did. Yeah, and this movie was really interesting. Very sort of minimalistic film. It's about these 2 guys in a morgue with a body, and they're trying to figure out, sort of, they're doing the autopsy of the woman, and then all this sort of really weird stuff happens. And again, it's just an interesting film. I liked the fact that, with a lot of films now, they're getting bigger and bigger with the whole sort of obsession, like the Marvel movies are getting bigger. Here's a film that is just like two guys in a room, with this dead body trying to figure out like what's going on here. So again, a really inventive film.
Yeah, I've heard a great deal about this, but I haven't seen it yet. Have you seen this one?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
My third favorite horror film of 2016 was The Neon Demon, which I think we covered. My second favorite horror film of 2016 is a film called Under the Shadow by Babak Anvari. It's an Iranian film, and it's, again, a very interesting film about, it takes place around the time of the revolution, the Iranian Revolution in the late 70s, and about a woman trying to sort of get her feet. She has a family, trying to figure out, I think she was going to medical school, was a doctor, and like now all of a sudden when you have this sort of the fundamentalist Islamic sort of movement coming in, what's her future going to be? And they have a daughter. What's her daughter's future going to be? And then the sort of the supernatural things start happening. So obviously there's this very heavy political metaphor, right, about sort of being in a society that's being overturned. You know what I mean? Like all of a sudden you think that everything's going to go one way, and all of a sudden the next day everything goes the other way. So again, really, really well done film.
Yeah, this is one I really wanted to check out, but I haven't gotten a chance to see it. Have you seen this one?
No.
My favorite horror film of 2016 was a film called Anti-Birth, directed by Danny Perez. This film, first of all, had a great cast. Natasha Lyonne, Chloe Sevigny, Meg Tilly was in it. And the film basically is about the horror of pregnancy. It's a female body horror film. And again, the terror of something gestating within you, a life that's growing, another being within inside you. We saw this in like Thing and Alien, even
Rosemary's
Baby, Videodrome,
Yeah.
So again, another film that in that sort of, in that vein. But again, I thought it was done really well. The acting was great. The imagery was really surrealistic. There are times with like, the creations that are coming out of this woman's body and the changes that her body's going through. It almost becomes beautiful. It almost becomes like this kind of abstract art. But again, just a movie that really I was not expecting to be great. I remember like putting it on. I'm like, oh, what's this going to be? And it really just blew me away.
Right.
Yeah, this is one I definitely got to check out. Have you seen this one?
Nope. Okay, I have 4 favorite horror films from 2016. One was Hush, about a girl who is deaf and a mute and can't hear, and has this like crazy killer going out in the middle of the woods and nowhere, which I think is a great concept. It's like that movie Wait Till Dark with Alan Arkin and Audrey Hepburn.
Yeah, I haven't seen Hush. Have you seen that one?
I have not, no.
Oh, it's good.
Our friend Cam really likes that movie.
Watch it it's on Netflix. It came out on Netflix. That's why.
Yeah, it was a Netflix original movie.
Yeah.
It's Mike Flanagan, who also did Oculus and Dr. Sleep and all that.
That actress was also in Oculus too.
Oh, is she?
Yes.
Okay.
Neon Demon, which we talked about. Don't Breathe, which I know you guys had mixed opinions about, but I thought it was alright. It was a good It's interesting how you see how these crooks they're breaking into a blind man's house trying to steal his money, and then you find out he's a sicko too. It's like you don't really know who you really feel for or root for.
Yeah, I didn't really like Don't Breathe that much. My biggest issue with it was just such a suspension of disbelief to believe that this blind guy could have done all this shit.
Right, that's all right. And
yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it was okay. I didn't think it was any great shape.
I liked Purge election year. I liked again Frank Grillo back as always, awesome. Just and I also liked the visual of that movie was so the way you imagine an apocalyptic kind of way, when they pass the Lincoln Memorial saying hell, wow, that is just so awesome. And
yeah, Purge election year was pretty good. I mean, again, I think Anarchy is easily the best film in that franchise, but yeah, I liked it. Not enough to put it on a list of my favorite horror films, but I liked election year. What do you think?
Me too. I liked it too. I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little on the nose with its political message, but whatever.
Yeah, I agree on that one. They were definitely mocking, Trump and Hillary that time.
So now on to our favorite horror films from 2017. We're going to start with my list. Again, this is in no particular order. The first movie I want to talk about is Split, which I think is probably M. Night Shyamalan's best movie, probably since Signs. M. Night Shyamalan, he's a very hit-or-miss director, and for a while, he was basically a joke in Hollywood for a while, but I think this really was sort of his comeback film in a lot of regards. And also, the film is set in the same universe as his film Unbreakable. I guess that was sort of the twist at the end, is that it's actually a sequel to Unbreakable, and then the follow-up to this, Glass, was the crossover between between this and Unbreakable. I liked Glass as well, but not as much as this one. What do you think of Split?
Actually, I didn't see it, but I did see Glass, and I wasn't crazy about Glass, so I'm probably not going to revisit this film.
All right.
I saw Split. I thought it was really good. I liked James McAvoy's performance, like how he did like multiple personalities. It was just so like scary and very believable. And I also really like felt like sympathetic towards the actress Anya Taylor.
Yeah, Anya Taylor-Johnson, is that it?
I think, yeah.
Yeah, she was also in The Witch.
Yes, loved her performance and loved her character. Very, very sympathetic, very likable. You really felt bad for like what her past was.
The next movie on my list is one that I know a lot of people did not like, but I don't know. I really enjoyed this one, and that's A Cure for Wellness. To me, it really felt like a strange amalgamation between a Hammer film and an Italian exploitation film. Like, it almost reminded me a little bit of like a Joe D'Amato film in some ways. It was just such a weird movie, and I think I just appreciated it because of how weird it was. But I know a lot of people did not like it. Have you seen A Cure for Wellness?
I have, and I agree with you. I mean, it is a really weird movie. It is a strange kind of movie, and there were scenes that I really liked in it, and other scenes that I was like kind of rolling my eyes. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say it's one of my favorites, but yeah, very interesting film.
Have you seen this one?
No, I haven't seen it, but I'll still watch it anyway.
The next movie on my list is Get Out, which is a really good movie. It's directed by Jordan Peele, who prior to this was probably best known for his sketch comedy with Key and Peele. This was a really good movie. It was a really good social satire. Jordan Peele did say that he took a lot of inspiration from Rosemary's Baby and The Stepford Wives, whereas those movies were about gender. This is very much about race. My only issue with this film, and it's not the movie's fault, but I don't like how a lot of people at the time the movie came out were acting like it was a big deal that horror was saying something profound about society. Like, I hate that people were kind of acting like this was the first socially relevant horror film, which is absolute bullshit because it's not. But what do you think of Get Out?
Well, I mean, I like the movie, but like, what? I guess I'm having the same problem with what you're saying. Is like, what was he saying that was so relevant in this film? That there is racism, that there is a white ruling elite exploits minorities. Like, you know what I mean? I didn't think he was saying anything that was so profound in this film. It was a good movie, don't get me wrong, but people just, like, as if he was saying something that was so insightful or so, like, that nobody had ever said before. And it's like, I don't know if I agree with that.
I mean, it's not that nobody's ever said it before, but it is an important message.
Sure.
And I think it's an important message to have in a horror film. But again, my only issue is that people were acting like this was the first time it's been done. Right. I also don't think the movie really should have been nominated for Best Picture. Don't get me wrong. I love that a horror film actually got nominated, but at the same time, I'm not sure if it was really Best Picture worthy. And I know it sounds weird that it's one of my favorite horror films, and yet it sounds like I'm attacking it. It's just, again, I mean, I do love this movie, but I will say I think it was probably slightly overrated.
No, absolutely. And then you have a film like Ganja and Hess, which I think really is a much more profound, much more complex analysis about race in American society and how African Americans view themselves and their sort of almost like this double consciousness that they must have in a white society. So again, I think it was a good movie. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed it. I think that Jordan Peele gets really good performances out of his actors and actresses, which I think he does also in Us, which I believe we're going to probably talk about as well. But again, I think that it was this praise for something that really what people wanted to see that there rather than what was there.
I mean, I liked it. I thought it was okay, but I just felt like it was cliche, and I felt like the trailers like kind of like gave too much away of it. And also, my dad when it was nominated for an Oscar, my dad was upset that Shape of Water won over Get Out. Well,
oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought Shape of Water was a better film, though.
I actually agree with. I love that movie.
Yeah, I didn't put Shape of Water on my list because I'm not sure if you would really classify that as horror, but
still great movie though. Still great movie. Loved it.
The next movie on my list is one that some people are probably going to call me out and say, no, that's not a horror film, and I can get why you wouldn't consider this to be a horror film, but I think it has enough horror elements in it. I mean, there's a scene where a giant spider leg impales a guy Cannibal Holocaust style, and that's Kong Skull Island, which I will say is the only film of the MonsterVerse that probably could qualify as horror, and I did actually review this movie for Horror Month. I also say all the time, genre can be a matter of opinion, and I do think this has enough horror elements. I mean, there are some genuinely creepy moments in this film, like some of the shots, like when you first see King Kong, the way he's silhouetted against the sun is honestly really freaking chillin', but it's also a really fun movie. This is easily my favorite of Legendary's MonsterVerse. What do you think of this?
Yeah, it was great. It was so entertaining. It's my second favorite King Kong film, after the original. I thought it was great. I thought it was exciting. It was everything you wanted to see in a giant ape movie.
Yeah, would you classify it as horror, or am I crazy?
No, I absolutely could.
All right.
You wouldn't be scared of a giant ape coming after you? I mean, come on,
Well, whether you classify whatever, it's a great movie. I love this. It was better than Peter Jackson, and I agree with you, Bill. My second favorite Kong film, because I love King Kong, the original. Also, this was like the best of one of the best ones of King Kong films.
The next movie on my list is Raw, which is technically a 2016 movie, but I don't think it got a wide release until 2017, so I'm counting it as a 2017 film. Raw was a really, really good film. It's a horror drama, and it's very much about this girl, it's about a girl who's a vegan, but she tries meat, and this leads to her becoming a cannibal. It's a really, really interesting movie. Definitely, there's a lot of social satire in it, and it's also very much a coming-of-age drama in a lot of ways. Have you seen this one?
No, I haven't. I'm dying to see it. I've heard just great things about it, so I definitely have to see it.
No, but it sounds good. I want to check it out.
The next movie on my list is The Belko Experiment, which was written by James Gunn. This was just a really fun movie. It was a really fun action horror film. Have you seen this one?
No, I have not.
I haven't seen it either.
The next movie on my list is It. Now, if you know me, you know I'm a diehard Stephen King fan, and the book It is actually my favorite Stephen King novel, and it's also one of my top 5 favorite books of all time. And I would say the movie, I do have some issues with the film, but admittedly a lot of my issues are just like nerdy nitpicks, and I sometimes go back and forth on whether I like this or the 1990 version of It better, because I do think there are some things that this does better than the 1990 version, and then there are some things I think the 1990 version did better, but overall I do really like it. And my only issue with the movie is there's a lot of really good drama in the film, but some of the drama gets undercut by some of the comedy in the film. But what do you think of It?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I know that with Stephen King fans, this is like their Bible, But I thought it was good. I enjoyed it. I thought that the young adult actors in the film were excellent. They were really good. They really carried the film. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm not like a huge fan. I know there's some people that this is like their favorite, not only their favorite book, but their favorite, horror story of all time. But yeah, it was good. I thought it was good.
I will admit, when it first came out, I was a little skeptical, but then when I saw it, I was just amazed, like how I'm like, wow, this is really made. This is really good. Just as good as I could see like some people complaining, like maybe people who grew up with the original miniseries not like this one as much, but at the same time, I still enjoy it. The kid actors were great. It was a good movie. And I liked Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise. I liked it how he really made it his own rather than copying what Tim Curry did. I think he was, you could say maybe he was a little more scary, but that's debatable who was more scary.
But Bill, would you agree with me that some of the comedy kind of undercut the drama in the film?
Absolutely. I don't know, and that's the frustration that I had with the film, is that, like you said, there was some really meaningful moments among these characters, and then it was kind of like it was taken away from us by like a lame joke or the comment or some snarky kind of thing. And it's like, I don't know why are directors now so afraid to let dramatic things happen in genre films and not have some snarky comment or some ironic thing. I don't know. It's frustrating.
The next movie on my list is The Void, which was a really good tribute to not only the films of John Carpenter but also the works of H.P. Lovecraft. It's a very Lovecraftian film. Bill, I know you were a really big fan of this one.
That's my favorite horror film of the decade.
Oh, really?
It's my favorite horror film of the whole decade. Yeah, I loved it. Again, another one of those films that has that sort of transcendent moments where the film just like goes to another level. And again, it's a film that starts in the physical and then goes to the metaphysical. And I mean, that's the real horror of the film, right? Like what awaits us on the other side of the void. Is it nothing? Is it harmful? Is it, you know what I mean? Like, you know, and again, that's what goes back to some of the Lovecraftian issues. But I love this film. I love the score. I like the acting in the film, the imagery. I loved it. And it's one of those films where I'm, by no means am I a filmmaker or creative in that way. But it reminds me, if I got the chance to make a horror film, I think it would look very similar to what they did in The Void. I think, you know, so that's another reason why I sort of really connected with the film. But yeah, it was my favorite horror film of the whole decade.
Okay. Have you seen The Void?
No, I have. I've heard a lot of good things about it. I would like to check it out at some point.
The next film on my list is a film that I thought was going to suck because the trailers, when I saw the trailers, I was like, oh God, this looks awful. But this was a very surprising film, and that's Happy Death Day. It's a horror comedy, kind of a slasher take on Groundhog Day, but it was a surprisingly good movie. What did you think of Happy Death Day?
Actually, I did not see it.
I thought it was okay. I mean, not one of my favorites, but at the same time, I still like enjoy. I thought it was like funny and very clever at times, and it kind of like made me think about like a combination of things like Scream, Mean Girls, and Groundhog Day.
Okay, so for 2017, even though it had my favorite horror film and my favorite sort of non-horror film were both released in 2017, I only have two films on my list. One of the films is Mother, right? The Darren Aronofsky film with Jennifer Lawrence. And again, I thought this was a really great movie. I love Aronofsky's films. I think his films really try to sort of go deeper than your sort of average movie. And this film really is about how patriarchy, how men exploit the creativity of women, right? That sort of, that male artists in some ways are jealous of women and they use and destroy them to gain fame and validation, right? They're sort of jealous of the fact that women can create naturally and men have to sort of, you know, go through all these other motions. But again, I thought it was a brilliant film. I thought the sort of imagery of the film was really interesting. I don't really like Jennifer Lawrence at all, but I actually thought she was halfway decent in this film. But again, I thought Mother was a really interesting film, and I'd like to see, again, the genre sort of push in these different ways.
Yeah, I have not seen Mother yet. It's a movie that I wanted to see when it came out, but I knew how polarizing it was, and I didn't want to sit in the theater and have some jackass go, this movie sucks, and then walk out of the theaters, because that's exactly what happened with The Witch, whereas I was watching it, some jackass had to shout out, this movie sucks, as he's leaving the theater. So it's a movie that I just avoid seeing in the theaters just for that reason. But it's a movie I definitely gotta check out at some point. I do love Darren Aronofsky's films. What did you think of Mother?
Actually, I've not seen it because I wanted to see when it came out too, but my dad was telling me it wasn't that good, but I'll still watch it anyway. Okay, favorite films of 2017. Again, no order, just Kong Skull Island, even though you can debate about that, it's still a great movie. I liked It Chapter 1, Split, and that's about it.
So now on to our list of our favorite horror films from 2018. We're going to start with my list, and on my part, there's no particular order, but the first movie I want to talk about is Annihilation, which was directed by the same person who directed Ex Machina. Annihilation, I thought, was a genuinely pretty creepy movie. It also has, in my opinion, one of the best scenes in recent horror, a scene involving a bear. If you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, I highly recommend Annihilation. Did you see this one?
I did. I didn't like it as much as you did. I thought that the film was kind of, it took more complex ideas, like from the works of like Philip K. Dick and the films of like Tarkovsky, and sort of watered them down.
Okay.
So again, it was an okay film, but I think that there's films that are better films that have dealt with this same kind of idea, like the movie Stalker, Solaris. So, yeah, that's how I felt about it.
Okay. Have you seen this one?
No.
The next movie on my list is A Quiet Place, which I thought was a really good, solid alien invasion movie. I liked how it had a lot of really good character drama in it. There were a few plot holes in the film, but I think the film was well made enough where you could forgive the plot holes. What do you think of A Quiet Place?
Actually, I did not see it.
All right.
I didn't see it either.
The next movie on my list is Upgrade, which I thought was a really fun action horror film. It was very similar to Hardcore Henry, like it had a very similar premise to that. Yeah, it was a really good film, especially because you felt so bad for the main character of the film, for what he's going through, you know, how he's becoming merged with this machine. Have you seen this one?
I have not, no.
No.
The next movie on my list is Lars von Trier's The House That Jack Built, which was just a brilliant and brutal freaking movie, but it was also a funny movie too. It was a really funny film. I also liked how the second half of the film is kind of a loose adaptation of Dante's Inferno to a point where Virgil is actually a character in the movie, but it's a really good film. Definitely reminded me of like American Psycho in some ways. Not just because of the humor in the film, but I think the film is definitely making a statement about things in our society and making a statement about masculinity. What do you think of The House That Jack Built?
Well, it was my third favorite horror film of 2018. I loved it. I thought it was great too. I love Lars von Trier's films. I think Lars von Trier's films are just like, again, another, like, he really mixes genres well together. His movie Antichrist is amazing. So I was so happy to see a new Lars von Trier film, and then the fact that it was sort of, based on serial killing. But yeah, I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was probably the best serial killer movie since, like, maybe Donald Camel's Wide of the Eye.
Have you seen this one?
I have not seen it, but I've heard a lot of good things about it, though.
So the next movie on my list is Hereditary, which I thought was a really well done horror drama film, and it's really a film about grief. Like, it reminded me a lot of like Stephen King's Pet Sematary in some ways, where it's really about this family dealing with this death and dealing with this loss, but they also have to deal with all this supernatural crap as well. And what I also liked about the film is it's really a film about fate, and how fucked up the very concept of fate really is. Like, this whole idea that everything we do is already preordained by God or Satan. That's a terrifying idea if you really stop to think about it. What do you think of Hereditary?
Yeah, I enjoyed it very much. I thought it was really good. I thought the performances in the film were brilliant. The story actually kept me guessing. I wasn't, a lot of times, when you watch a lot of these films, especially if you're really into the genre, you can kind of telegraph what's going to happen, and I couldn't do it with this film. So I thought it was really good. I mean, I liked it way better than I liked Midsommar.
Okay.
Loved it. Probably one of my on my list of favorite horror films. Loved Toni Collette's performance. That scene when she like yells and screams at her son at dinner time, like, whoa, holy shit. Mm-hmm. It had a little bit of like a little Wicker Man theme to it at the end and all.
Yeah, the movie definitely reminded me of, like, it felt like an amalgamation of like Pet Sematary and Rosemary's Baby to some degree, and a little bit of Wicker Man in there as well.
Yeah.
The next movie I want to talk about is one that I know me and Bill are going to disagree on, and that's the Suspiria remake. I actually really dug this movie. I know a lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people found it to be pretentious, but what I appreciate about this movie is just the fact that they actually tried with this. This wasn't just some like, paint by numbers remake. Like, they actually were trying to make a good movie with this. I know Bill might disagree with me, but at least this was one that was trying. It was trying to be something a little bit more. But what do you think of the Suspiria remake?
Yeah, I hated it, actually. I think this is the only film we seriously disagree on. But I hated it. I thought it was a hipster version of the original. Honestly, that's what I thought about it. It was like this all flash, no substance. They tried to give lip service with the Holocaust kind of stuff. It was so shallow and so trite. It showed how brilliant the original was. I mean, that's the only good thing I could say about this. It just made me appreciate the original that much more.
I still haven't seen it, but I wanted to see when it came out, but I was too late, and I heard a lot of mixed opinions about it, but I still I may check it out for curiosity.
The next movie I want to talk about is Overlord, which was sort of a Nazi zombie film, and I really loved this movie. This was a lot of fun. My only issue with the film is just how blatantly historically inaccurate it was. Like, the whole deal where you had the black soldier fighting alongside all those white soldiers, which didn't actually happen in real life, but I can kind of forgive that because I kind of view the film as being set in like an alternate universe, and to me this really felt like an amalgamation between World War II movies and Vietnam movies, but I enjoyed the hell out of Overlord. What do you think of this one?
Well, I thought I was really going to enjoy it. Like, I was really looking forward to it. Again, I'm like a sucker for like Nazi horrors, Nazi zombie kind of films, and I thought it was bland. I thought it was cliched. I was really really disappointed by it.
Okay, all right. Have you seen this one?
No.
And the last movie on my list is Mandy, which was just an amazing freaking film. I remember I saw this in the theaters, and it's just a great mix between a horror film, a drama film, an action film. There's a little bit of dark humor in the film as well. It's kind of like this weird mix between a cult movie, and I don't mean cult movie as in it has a cult following. I mean there's an actual cult in the film, but also sort of this like psychedelic, almost dreamlike film. Like it's an experience of a film. It really is. And I do want to point out that scene after Nick Cage's character kills one of the demon bikers, and then he takes a celebratory snort of cocaine. That got a huge laugh out of the audience when I saw it. What do you think of Mandy?
Well, it's my favorite horror film of 2018, and probably my second favorite horror film of the whole decade. Panos Cosmatos. I mean, he did Beyond the Black Rainbow. This is a guy that I really think that he's going to be a great one. If he keeps making kind of the films that he made, like Beyond the Black Rainbow and Mandy, he's going to be one of the great fantastique directors. I mean, I loved it. Me too. I agree with you. I loved everything about it. I think Nick Cage actually was surprisingly good. He was like tender and sort of held back his performance in the early sequences of the movie, and then he just went like dog nuts like in the rest of the film. But the imagery and the soundtrack and just like you said, it's a total experience. It kind of reminded me of an Alejandro Jodorowsky film.
Yeah, in a way. What I also liked about the film is like, I liked how his performance, it is over the top, but there's a reason for the over the topness. Like, if you were in the same situation as him, you would probably be acting the same way. Like, and I also liked how there's sort of this ambiguity where you're not sure how much is supernatural and how much is just in the character's head. Like, the demon bikers, are they really demons, or are they just so fucked up on drugs that they think they're demons? I mean, it's such an interesting film, and the main villain of the film, the cult leader, I don't know about you, but I got a real Richard Lynch vibe from him. Like, he really reminded me of Richard Lynch's character from Cut and Run.
Right, and he also reminded me of God Told Me To. That's
All
another
right.
one where he's like, he's that like the Christ alien or whatever like that in that movie, But yeah, absolutely. It's like Richard Lynch meets like, Charles Manson or something. Like, he's a musician. He has this really bad like folk music. It was great. It was like so great on so many levels. I love it.
Yeah. Did you see Mandy?
No, but I hear a lot of good things about it. I'm dying to watch it at some point.
Okay, well, for my 2018 list, I only have 4 films, and 2 of them we talked about already. But my 4th favorite film, horror film of 2018, was Apostle by Gareth Evans. This was a Netflix-only film, I believe. And again, I thought it's another one of the folk horror. I think it takes place in the early 1900s about this religious cult, and sort of this girl disappears that goes into the cult. She disappears, and her brother comes to look for her. And again, it's another one of those kind of cult kind of movies that we're talking about, and it is the supernatural and nature's a part of it. Again, very just a suspenseful movie, and I really like the imagery. But I also thought it was interesting too is that this film sort of broaches something that usually you don't get in sort of cult movies. Like, why would someone join a cult? Like, usually that's not a question that's asked in the film. Like, you just accept these people are part of this cult. And in this film, a lot of these people are, it's the early 1900s, the Industrial Revolution. They're sort of like down and out people. You could understand why, like, they had no hope, why they would sort of maybe go join a cult, which offers you some meaning, which offers you some protection, some security. So I thought that the film was actually quite good.
All right. Yeah, this is one I've heard a great deal about. I just haven't gotten a chance to watch it.
My 3rd favorite film was, as we discussed, Lars von Trier's The House That Jack Built. And I thought Matt Dillon's performance was brilliant in the film as well.
Yeah.
My 2nd favorite film, horror film, was Gaspar Noé's Climax, which, again, borderline whether it's a horror film or not. And again, Gaspar Noé is another one of those filmmakers, like Panos Cosmatos, where his films are an experience. You just have to just immerse yourself. You can't start thinking about, does this make sense? Or what, logic and reason kind of like go out the window in his films, but they're just amazing. And this is a film about these dancers that are in this dance troupe, and they have a party after their sort of big performance or whatever, and they drink the sangria, and somebody spikes the sangria with the hallucinogenic, and they just all go sort of crazy. And the film really is about, how these, again, artists have very fragile egos, and it only takes a little bit of pushing to have their egos just totally, go off the wall. There's even a character in the film named Psyche. So again, it's just like, it's a film really about how even though we think we connect with people, do we really connect with them? these dancers come together and work together. Yet what you find out after they take the hallucinogenic, they take spike stuff, is that they really despise each other. They hate themselves. Again, it's all facade, and that facade crumbles, and it only takes a little bit of a push.
Yeah, this is one I didn't get a chance to see. I did want to see it when I saw the trailer for it. I was like, holy shit, I gotta check this out. But yeah, I didn't get a chance to see it.
Again, I think Climax is a better remake of Suspiria than Suspiria is. But I think he would have been great at making that film as well. My first favorite, as we said, was Mandy, which I thought was just brilliant.
My favorite horror films of 2018 were Hereditary, which we already talked about. Halloween, because I'm a sucker, because I love the Halloween franchise. I mean, I wouldn't say it was the best thing, but I just really enjoyed it because I was excited that Jamie Lee Curtis was coming back, and I was a little bit hesitant about the idea they were avoiding the sequels. I thought, let's go in blinded. Let's see, let's see they'll do something different. And it was.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it did something different. It was still kind of in the same vein as the other ones.
Yeah.
I think it was necessary to ignore the other sequels because of how bad they got.
Wow.
I liked this one, not enough to where I would say it was one of my favorite horror films, but I enjoyed it. It was a solid movie. What do you think of this one?
I enjoyed it. I don't think it was a radical reinvention or anything like that. It was a good movie. It was good. But again, I don't think it did anything that was so outside the box that we haven't seen in some of the, H2O or any of the other ones.
Did any of you guys see Unsane?
No, I haven't seen
have not
Unsane.
either.
Oh, it was really, really... It's amazing how it was done by Steven Soderbergh.
Soderbergh.
It's hard to believe that it was shot on a phone by him. It felt like it was made some 20-year-old college student, rather. But still, really, really good movie. The first Purge movie was also one of my favorite horror films from 2018.
Yeah, I like that one too. Not enough to put it on this list, but yeah, I really enjoyed the first Purge, which is actually the fourth one, but
I liked it because it explains why the Purge happened, because of an economic crisis, it's what saved the economy, and also, I like the main character was...
I forgot his name, but yeah, he was a great character.
Yes, it's amazing how he was a drug dealer, yet he's the hero of this film.
Have you seen the first
I did.
Purge?
Yeah, it was okay. It was good. I enjoyed it.
All right. So now on to the final year of the 2010s. Again, this is in no particular order. The first movie I want to talk about is Ready or Not, which I thought was a really fun horror comedy. Have you seen this one?
I have not.
I saw it. It was really good. I remember when it came out, I didn't even know anything about it. I didn't see a trailer to it. I went to see it with Some of His Day at the time. That's a different story. Anyway, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun, cool, and messed up.
It was a fun take on the whole Faustian sort of story, the whole deals with the devil thing. I loved when one of the members of the family, because he's not sure if it's all real or not, he's looking up on Google, deals with the devil, real or bullshit. And the next movie on my list is Us from Jordan Peele, which I personally like this better than Get Out, and I liked Get Out a lot, but I don't know, what I really liked about Us was it really felt like an elongated Twilight Zone episode. And I know a lot of people who complained about how it didn't make much sense, and to me, that's kind of why I liked it. It felt like just an elongated Twilight Zone episode, and there were some really creepy moments in this film. I thought even creepier than Get Out. What do you think of Us?
Well, it's on. I only have two films on my 2019 list, for horror films, and that's one of them that's on here. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was really well done. I think that Jordan Peele is able to get really good performances from his actors and actresses. I thought the performances in the movie were excellent. I agree. I thought it was a better movie than Get Out, but I'm not sure if he's really the film. What was the point he was trying to make? Was he trying to make a point about class? Was he trying to make a point about race? Still, I think that's kind of muddled in the film, but I think as he makes more films, I think he'll get more on point with that.
Yeah, I actually do have an interpretation of what point he's trying to make, but I can't really get into it because I would get into spoilers, and I don't really want to spoil the movie. Have you seen this one?
No, I still haven't seen it yet.
The next movie on my list is Midsommar, which I didn't like as much as Hereditary, but I still really enjoyed this one. It was definitely very similar to The Wicker Man, had a lot of Wicker Man vibes to it. But Bill, I know you didn't like this one as much as I did.
No, I didn't. I actually think it's really overrated. I mean, from what I had heard about it, I was so excited to see it. I really want to see it, and it really, again, maybe it's just my own expectations being projected onto the film. But yeah, I just didn't. It was just like any other kind of cult movie where you knew going in something bad was going to happen to them. I just thought it was very predictable and cliched. And why I thought this film was not as good as Wicker Man, why Wicker Man is so brilliant, is because in this film, it's this idea that, okay, we're from America, we're from this Judeo-Christian background, our beliefs are good, our beliefs are real, and these people have really weird beliefs. They're the ones that are wrong, we're right. You know, and I think that's just very like it's very sort of easy to say that. Whereas in Wicker Man, the whole point of the Wicker Man is no matter what your beliefs are, what your ideology is that it's blind faith. You're going to be deceived, right? Because you have this idea that Edward Woodward's character is a Christian and he's being deceived by Christianity to believe in don't have sex on things. But you find out that Lord Summerall, he's doing the same thing. He's deceiving his followers there, that it's about power and it's about deception, it's about blind faith, and this movie really doesn't get at that.
But what I liked about the film was, the thing I really got from this film was the fact that the main girl in the film, she's kind of treated like crap by her boyfriend and her friends, and yet this cult actually treat her with respect, and you kind of get the sense that she's going to be happier with this cult than she ever was with her boyfriend or her friends, and that's kind of the point of the movie that I got.
Well, like Rosemary's Baby is very similar to that too, which I think Rosemary's Baby did it better.
Okay, fair enough.
And also too, I mean, there's you could tell he was trying to be like Kubrickian in his there's the one part where the what's her name, the main female character, like on her bed she's got, did you guys see that, the Shining pattern?
Yeah,
her bedspread's like from The Shining, like the carpet in The Shining, So again, I thought Hereditary was much better than this film.
Fair enough. What I personally liked about the film also was I liked how all the stuff taking place in America in these urban environments are so bleak in how they're shot, but when it gets to Sweden and they get to this, like, what would you call that, a rural community?
The commune, yeah,
it's so beautiful, and it's so, like, even though there's horrific stuff happening, it feels like such a happier place than the place they're coming from.
Right.
So I like that sort of juxtaposition that you saw in the film. We just have different opinions on it.
Absolutely.
What do you think of this one?
I still haven't seen Midsommar yet. I know. I'm going to hell for not seeing half of these movies.
One thing I noticed is this film had a huge following among certain people. Like, I know a lot of girls who, around Halloween, were dressing up like Florence Pugh's character, like the May Queen, where they're dressing up as that for Halloween and stuff. Right. A lot of my friends really dug this movie, and I did too. Again, I still think Hereditary was the better film.
And I think The Wicker Man is so much better than this film, too.
Yeah, I like Wicker Man.
The next movie on my list is Dr. Sleep, Mike Flanagan's adaptation of the Stephen King novel, which was a sequel to The Shining. So this movie is a sequel to the Stanley Kubrick film. Now, is it as good as the Kubrick film? Absolutely not. But this was a really, really solid horror film. It was, I think Mike Flanagan, he had a daunting task because he was trying to bridge both the Stephen King novel and the Stanley Kubrick film, which are so different from each other. And I thought this film did a really good job at bridging the two. I thought it was very well shot, very well acted. And again, this goes to the Stephen King novel. It's not really a straight sequel per se. It's just another movie that happens to take place in the Shining universe, because the villains of the movie aren't ghosts. The villains of the movie are these psychic vampires that feed on people with the shine. But I really enjoyed Dr. Sleep, and I haven't read the book yet, so I don't know how this stacks up against the book, but I just thought this was a really good movie. Have you seen this one?
I have not. I'm dying to see it, though. I definitely want to see it.
I was really blown away by Dr. Sleep. It was really good. I was surprised and amazed how really good it was. I liked how we saw what happened to Danny Torrance years later and stuff, and also how, like, when he goes... I also like how, like, we didn't, like... When we see, like, that they didn't, like, use, like, footages of the original Shine. They just got, like, other actors and just, like, made it their own, which I thought was pretty clever and great.
The next movie on my list, and this was actually my favorite film of 2019, and that's The Lighthouse, the Robert Eggers film, with Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. And this is where I get really annoyed with people. Because of Twilight, a lot of people are like, oh, Robert Pattinson, he's never been in a good movie. And it's like... This movie and movies like Good Time and some of his other movies prove that, no, he's a good actor. That the Twilight movies did so much damage to this poor guy's career, I think, because he's actually a damn good actor, and he's damn good in this movie, and both him and Willem Dafoe play so well off of each other, and it's really a film about isolation. Like, it reminds me a lot of The Shining or even The Thing to some degree, that it's about these two men really breaking down because of cabin fever. You haven't seen this one,
no,
right?
But again, I think it's on pay-per-view. It's on, so I'm probably gonna watch it this weekend. I'm dying to see it.
Yeah, what I also liked about it is there are supernatural elements in the film, but you're not sure how much of it is real and how much of it is just in the characters' heads. There's a lot of stuff from Greek mythology in the film, but you're not sure how much of that was actually really happening.
I haven't seen it yet, but it sounds pretty good, though.
The next movie on my list is the Child's Play remake, which I happen to really enjoy. I like that it did something different from the original. In the movie Chucky, instead of being possessed by the soul of a serial killer like he was in the original film, he's just an AI gone wrong. It's basically a sci-fi take on Chucky. But I thought it was clever. I thought it was a really clever movie. It got a little... there were moments in the film where it was clear they were trying to cop Stranger Things a little bit, but overall I enjoyed the Child's Play remake. Bill, have you seen this one?
I have not. No, I have not seen it.
You didn't miss anything. Anyway, I wasn't a fan of I mean, I thought Mark Hamill was okay as Chucky. He was good, but I do give him credit they were trying something different, but I just was not... Like, why do they have to make Andy 13 years old? Like, at 13, you're done with toys.
Yeah, well, they made it make sense because it was an AI thing, so they made it make sense that a 13-year-old kid would be into something like this.
Yeah, but I still just wasn't into it. I just didn't like it that much.
And the last movie on my list is Villains, which had Micah Monroe, who was in It Follows, and Bill Skarsgård. Basically, it's about two criminals who rob this house, and it turns out that the couple in the house are serial killers, and they have a little girl chained up in the basement. And it's a really surprisingly sweet film because of the chemistry that Bill Skarsgård had with Micah Monroe, and it's a film I really enjoyed. It's a horror comedy with some elements of drama. Have you seen Villains?
I haven't even heard of it.
It was good. It got a wide release, but it kind of just came and went. Mm-hmm. It came out in September, I think.
Okay.
I haven't seen it yet either.
Okay, well, actually I only have one film that we haven't discussed on my list, and that's Josh Lobo's I Trapped the Devil. Again, a small film, minimal. I think there's only previously 3 characters in the film, but a very interesting film. A film about sort of, when we want to have control over our lives. So this guy believes that, the devil has been doing all these bad things in the world, so he traps him so that he'll actually have control over his life and we won't have all these bad things happen to us, which really is, down to chance. So yeah, it was an interesting film. It was a film I did not expect it to go in the direction it did, but I was very impressed.
Okay. Yeah, this is one I've heard about. I just haven't gotten a chance to see it. Have you seen this one?
No, haven't seen it. I have 4 on my top 2019 favorite horror movies. Pet Sematary, which I thought it wasn't that bad. I mean, you didn't like it, right?
I liked it when I saw it, but my issue with it was I just got no emotion out of it. Like, I mean, I love the book, and I love the 1989 version, but I don't know, this one, it just... I don't know, it's a story about a kid dying. You would think you would get a lot of emotion out of that, and I really didn't.
Right.
It just didn't really work for me.
Well,
I mean, I thought the acting was good, but... Yeah, just, again, I felt no real emotional connection to the story this time around.
Well, I still enjoy it because, again, at least they switched up. They did something different with them, like with the original. And I will admit, John Lithgow was okay, but Fred Gwynne is still better as... Oh,
yeah, Fred Gwynne was Judd Crandall.
Yes, I agree with that.
Have you seen the Pet Sematary?
I have not. No, I haven't seen it yet. I really like the original, of course.
Yeah.
But I'll definitely see this one.
Have you read the book?
Yes. Well, when it came out, like years ago. And I thought it was great. I thought it was a very good book.
Yeah, I mean, the movie, I'll give the movie this. At least it took some things from the book, like the Wendigo, which I thought was a really interesting aspect of the story. They actually included the Wendigo this time around. But, yeah, overall, I just didn't really care. I didn't hate it, but I didn't really care too much for this version. I will say I did like the cover of Ramone's Pet Sematary that played during the credits. I think the band's called Starcrawler or something. It's actually a really good cover of the song, but yeah, overall just wasn't crazy about this one.
Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Did you see that one?
No, not yet.
Oh, it was really good. I just loved it. Like, even though I never read the books as a kid, but I just loved how they paid tribute to the pictures in the books. And I also liked how the nostalgia. It takes place in 1960 and no cell phones, and they really kept true to the nostalgia.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And have you seen Scary Stories to Tell?
No, I didn't. Again, another one I really want to see.
It was I
like his other films, like Troll Hunter and. The other one I was talking about, the Autopsy of Jane Doe.
I saw Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark opening day when it came out, on the first night, at Ready or Not and Dr. Sleep.
So that was our list of our favorite horror films from the 2000s, or 2010s, I should say. How would you wrap up this past decade in horror?
I actually think it was one of the better decades of horror. Actually, maybe since the 80s. I thought there was a lot of variety. I thought that there was some really interesting social commentary, that sort of, within the horror films. Yeah, I enjoyed doing this list. I realized how many films I really enjoyed this decade.
I feel like it's a little tough because I feel like when something new was coming out, it was getting like a mixed like response from critics and audiences. Like, oh, it was good, it was bad. I feel like this is a tough because there's still other like horror films that we talked about I still haven't seen yet. It's really hard to tell like describing what this decade was. It's not like it was like back like in the 70s and 80s when you had like groundbreaking like horror movies and stuff like that. But I don't know. This is really a tough decade even to describe like what was the best of this decade, even what was
Well, you got to admit it was better than the decade before.
Yeah, I could agree with you on that one because the 2000s was like butchered with like even though we're still getting remakes, at least they're still trying to put something different in remakes.
All right, so that was our video, and bye.
You crushed the shell of the walnuts, don't even believe, and you stared at me for a century, making me feel guilty. And you grabbed my hand.